Good morning, people. Officially, welcome to Friday, the best day of the week. Unati is here. Good morning to you, Unati. Tufshin Sana is here. Good morning to you. Let's do it. Let's get back into this. So, ready, guys? Ready, Daniel? Ready, Jim? Ready, Yoya? Mahmoud, ready? Let's do it. So, yesterday we were talking about Russia and the Soviet Union, and specifically we were talking about this guy, right? Because Russia was kind of in transition, right? They were in transition between a monarchy, they had a single ruler, a czar, and they were transitioning to, we don't know yet, right? We know that the czar had created a Duma, right, which was kind of a representative government. We know that the czar and the Duma weren't cooperating very well. And then finally in 1917, good morning. Finally in 1917, the Tsar is kind of convinced to step down, right? So he steps down, he abdicates the throne, both for him and for his youngest son. And then Russia is kind of, what's it going to become, right? And so the Duma establishes a provisional government. We said a provisional government was a government that was kind of temporary, right? It was for the time being. Provisional governments are temporary for the time being, and of course, that government was in charge of, running the country, but also drafting a new constitution, right? To figure out how would Russia work, right? Is it going to have a democracy? How do people get elected? How does the government kind of organize itself? That's what constitutions do, right? And so this provisional government is trying to run the country, write a new constitution, and of course deal with the war, right? Because Russia is still involved in a war. And then along comes this guy here, right? Inspired by the writings of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. He wants to establish communism in Russia, right? And so he's part of a party called the Bolsheviks. Lenin is. They are a revolutionary party, so they're arguing for revolution based on the writings of Karl Marx, right? Based on Marxist principles. He's promising the people peace, land, and bread, right? Which we said the peace was they were going to get out of World War I, right? The land was that the peasants would be given land, right? Land would be redistributed. Currently in Russia, it's all held, not currently, but at the time in Russia, it's all held by the Tsar and the nobles, kind of at the top of society. Lenin says he's going to distribute land to all. And of course, bread, right? Russia's been experiencing food shortages for quite some time. People have been going hungry. They just want their bread, right? Is that so hard? Actually, it is. It's going to be really hard for the Soviet Union, but we'll get there. So Lenin promises these three very simple things, right? And so we said that in 1905, that's when the Duma is created, right? After the defeat of Russia by Japan, after Bloody Sunday, there's all sorts of strikes and protests, and the Duma is created, right? I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. So that was in 1905, and so about 12 years later, we're still having struggles, and the Tsar is kind of convinced to step down, right? This is the February Revolution. And so the provisional government is working away, trying to manage this crisis. Again, just trying to get their hands on the controls here because things are chaotic and, things are chaotic. And then again, I'm going to jump through the coalitions here. Along comes Lenin and his Bolsheviks, right? And so they decide that the provisional government is split, right? So there's kind of, those two coalitions we read about with guys like Kornilov and Lov and Kerensky. They're trying to sort of figure out a way to share power, right? As kind of like a prime minister and a president and a foreign minister or something. They're trying to figure out who's in charge, right? And so Lenin sees this and he's like, they're divided, they're all against each other, this is my moment, or this is our moment. And so he and his Bolsheviks strategically identify a few targets in St. Petersburg and Moscow. They attack them with guns. They overthrow the government. They jail members of the Provisional Government. And there you go, right? Just as easy as that, the Bolsheviks have seized power, right? And are now and Lenin is now in charge of Russia, right? I said yesterday, though, that let's pay attention to something here. The idea that communist revolutions are supposed to come from the bottom, right? The people are supposed to realize that, oh, they're being exploited by the bourgeoisie. They're being exploited by capitalist business owners, right? And the proletariat are going to realize this. They're going to see that it's unfair, and they're going to overthrow those guys and establish kind of a workers' paradise, right? Where everybody shares in the profits of society, right? But of course, is that what happens here? Is that what happens in Russia? What's that? Well, yeah, but the trick is here is that in a communist revolution, the way that Karl Marx described it, it comes from the people, right? And the people say, we want communism, we're throwing out the bourgeoisie, and we're going to take control of the means of production for all. That's what Marx says. But that's not what happens here, right? Yes, the people are unhappy, but Lenin uses this and he seizes control of the government, right? It's a coup d'etat, it's an overthrow of the state, right? These guys go in there with guns and illegally arrest proper legitimate members of the government and throw them in jail. And then, they gain power through violence, right? They take over with their guns. So again, the communist revolution doesn't come from the bottom, right? The people aren't rising up and saying, we want communism. Instead, we've got the Bolsheviks and Lenin. They go into the top, kick out the provisional government, and then they put themselves in the place, right? And now they're going to create communism from the top down, right? And as you probably started to read about last time, it doesn't go very well, right? Because, spoiler alert here, but the people actually don't want communism. They wanted change, right? They didn't want the czar. They didn't want to be in the war. They wanted an end to their food shortages, but they weren't asking for communism. They were just asking for change. They're asking for reform. But again, what they got was a party who took control and then gave them communism from the top down, whether they wanted it or not. And again, as you see in the textbook, they didn't really want it, right? But we'll get to that. So this isn't really a communist revolution that Russia has. It's an overthrow of the state by communists, which is not the same thing, right? One comes from the bottom, right? One comes from the grassroots. The other gets imposed from the top. And that's not the same thing, I would say. So we read this article yesterday, what if the Russian Revolution never happened? And the author kind of identified a number of kind of important events in the 20th century that probably never would have occurred, right? And so lots of, if you look before 1945, so if you look from the end of World War II and earlier, you'll see that, without a Russian Revolution, people in Europe were really scared of having a Marxist revolution in their own country, right? And the Germans certainly were. And Hitler was able to use that to inspire fear in people and to gain power for himself, right? People were scared of Bolshevism. They were scared of communism. They were scared of Jewish people. And of course, Hitler kind of combined those two things into one and said, oh, it's Jewish Bolshevism you need to be afraid of. Not really any such thing. But that doesn't matter. He stuck it together anyway and convinced people to be afraid, right? And so the author says, well, maybe Hitler doesn't gain power, right? In a world where there is no Russian Revolution, maybe there's no Hitler, Maybe there's no World War II, right? Maybe there's no Cold War. Maybe the US never really becomes the type of country that it is now because it doesn't have to sort of protect the world from the Soviet Union, right? Maybe China, not maybe, China definitely doesn't become the country that it is today, right? China is a communist country that's based on, the creation of the People's Republic by Mao in 1949. That doesn't really happen without the Soviet Union because he gets lots of help and backing from them. So when you kind of remove those things from the 20th century, when you remove the Second World War, the Nazis, the Holocaust, the Cold War, the rise of China, when you kind of remove those things from the atomic bomb, when you remove those things from the 20th century, from 20th century history, it becomes pretty difficult to imagine what the world would actually look like because the events are so big that are connected to this one. There's no Soviet Union, there's no Cold War. What does Russia look like today without the Soviet Union? Probably better, to be honest. But yeah, like it becomes almost impossible to imagine, right? Because the events are so big and they have such a big impact. But of course, the author says that this revolution is kind of a long shot, right? There were lots of reasons why it might not have succeeded, right? The Bolsheviks took a long time to seize the government buildings. Lenin himself was almost shot. When the Tsar stepped down, none of the really important Bolsheviks were even in the country, right? And so there's all these little things. The Provisional Government and the Tsar had years and years and years to make changes that would have, made people not support the Bolsheviks. There's all kinds of reasons why something like this might not have happened, but it's a bit of a long shot, but it does, right? It does happen and has massive effects for the rest of the world. As I say, to the point where I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I can imagine a world without this happening because just so many other things are connected to it. I honestly don't know what the world would look like today without this happening. It might be a better place, to be honest, or it might not. It's hard to know. So I think at the end of yesterday's class, I asked you to read this section and answer the questions. Can I give you maybe 6 minutes or so just to look over that section again and remind yourself? Because it's a big section, there's a few questions, and I'd like to make sure it's fresh up here, okay? So I'm going to put some time on the clock here just so we can reread or just kind of review that section, and then we can talk about the questions, okay? You guys ready, or just a few more minutes, or what do you think? A few more minutes? Okay. Maybe just another minute or so, okay? Okie dokie. So let's talk about some of these if we can. Um, let's talk about some of these if we can. So this talks a little bit about the Bolsheviks taking power, right? And like I mentioned, they gain power militarily, right? So they go in, they arrest members of the provisional government, and they take control, right? But pretty much immediately they get involved in a civil war, right? Because of course they've seized power illegally, right? And there are people who don't want them in power, and so they're fighting this. They're fighting this coalition of people. And did you catch who this coalition is? This white army that's fighting against them. Who are they? You know, you go to all this work to plan a revolution. You overthrow the government, and then the next thing you know, people are shooting at you, right? Poor Bolsheviks. Sorry, Mahmoud, did you find it? Well, when they what? So, does anyone see it? There's the white, or so there's the Red Army, which are the Bolsheviks led by Trotsky, and then there's the White Army. And there are, I think, some. No. Well, Trotsky is a Bolshevik, right? So he's one of Lenin's buddies, right? So he's fighting on behalf of Lenin and the communists, right? But on the other side, there's this White Army, right? And they're not like
from Russia, right?
mostly, but yeah. So they're not white like race-wise, but so the the White Army is composed of some royalists or czarists, right? So some people who want to put the czar back on the throne. It's composed of constitutional democrats, right? So people who were interested in having a democracy in Russia and still want one. They're trying to get the Bolsheviks out of there. There are social revolutionaries they mention. There are some foreign powers as well. So the British and the French, and kind of they're involved in the White Army. All of them are trying to get the Bolsheviks out, right? So the Bolsheviks overthrow the provisional government, set themselves up in power, and pretty quickly a bunch of people get together and try to get the Bolsheviks back out of power, right? And that's this White Army. And so they're a mix of different people, a mix of different kind of things they're fighting for, but all they can really agree on is that they don't like the Bolsheviks, and they're going to try to kick them back out, right? So this war is kind of going on for a little while, and meanwhile, Lenin is going to try to nationalize agriculture. Now, what on earth does nationalize agriculture mean? What is he actually doing? Say that again? Yeah, okay, so he's in the process of developing a socialized state or a socialist state. What does that mean, though? That's what you want to ask me? Okay. Do you know what socialism is? Let's do that. Well, here, I could explain it to you, but I'm going to do this. Yeah. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to Google socialism. Got it? What's it say? Socialism or death? You got the point? Okay. So I've just thrown it up on the screen here, but you can see this is where the means of production is owned by the community as a whole, right? So in this case, when when Lenin is trying to create a socialist state, when he's nationalizing agriculture, what he's doing is he's basically taking the land and making it the property of the state, right? When it was back in Tsarist times, all the land and factories, they were either owned by the Tsar or they were owned by all the rich guys, right? The nobles, the aristocracy at the top of society, right? Most people didn't own anything at all. The poor farmers working away, they didn't own their own land. It was all owned by the rich guys, right? And so Lenin is saying, okay, all of that land that used to belong to the Tsar and to the nobles, all those factories and farms and all those things, they all belong to the state now. They all belong to Russia, or as it soon will be called, the Soviet Union. So now nobody owns anything, or everybody owns it, however you want to think about it, right? So this is kind of interesting though, right? Because when the peasants were, wanting revolution, what did they want? They just wanted to own a little piece of land, right? So that they could have a little farm, they could grow their crops, they could feed their family. That's what they wanted, right? And so Lenin promised them land, right? But did he give it to them? Not officially, right? So technically, they don't own the land, right? So, you have the deed to the land, right? You have the title, you have the piece of paper. They don't own the land, but technically everybody owns the land because the state owns the land. The people own the land, but you don't own any particular part of it. So did he give the peasants land, their own land? Kind of depends. Kind of depends how you think about it, right? I mean, yeah, it depends how you think about it. So, do the peasants start to cooperate with Lenin? How does this nationalization of agriculture go at first? Let me look here. Here we go. Look at the bottom left of page 75. It says here, Lenin's promise of land to the peasants was fulfilled by his abolition of all private ownership, making land the property of the whole nation. So again, the land belongs to the people, but nobody actually specifically owns any part of it. So again, I'm not sure if he fulfilled his promise on that, but we'll leave that. So he says here that the peasants were more interested in keeping the fruits of their labor rather than enjoying land ownership. So, as the state tries to take all of the harvest from these peasants, we see that their production, their harvest, declines by 40% in 3 years. The black market absorbed the bulk of farm produce, with 60% of bread distributed through illegal channels, right? So are people on board with this communism thing? No, right? Because what you're supposed to do is now you're supposed to work hard on the farm, gather up the harvest, and give it all to the government, right? And the government will give you what you need, right? Money or food or shelter. Everybody now works for the government. But the peasants are saying, no, I don't want that. I want to keep my harvest and sell it and make a profit, right? But is that communism? No, that's capitalism. That's what we do in capitalism. We own our own stuff, we sell things, and we keep the money, right? That's capitalism. Communism says, no, give your production to the government will sell it, and then they'll give you whatever money they think you deserve, right? So the peasants aren't going along with it, right? They're not working as hard because the government's just taking all their harvest. they're selling stuff on the black market, right? So they're supposed to hand over all of their food to the state, but instead they keep some of it and sell it kind of under the table and make some extra cash. So again, Lenin is trying to push to create communism from the top down, right? He's imposing communism on these people, and these people are like, no, we don't want this. This is garbage, right? We want to keep our own food and sell it and make some cash, right? So that's not going very well, right? Again, because communism didn't come from the bottom. The people didn't want it. The Bolsheviks are trying to impose it from the top. They're trying to make people communist, even though that wasn't the way they wanted to go. So this nationalization of agriculture, kind of getting all the land, making it the property of the state, and then telling everyone who works on it, you have to give us all of your harvest, and then we'll give you what you need. It's not going well, right? The people aren't on board so far. Let's see. Okay, so we said there was that civil war between the Bolsheviks and the White Army, the Red Army versus the White. The Red Army is going to win, right? And they're going to defeat the White Army. Why do the Bolsheviks win? Why do the Bolsheviks win? Or why does the White Army lose, if you prefer? Who? The Reds? Yeah, so Trotsky's Red Army is definitely more organized and more sort of, they have better strategy. They're more disciplined than the White Army. That's. They're what? Maybe. Okay, maybe it's a supply issue, right? There's some other stuff though too. Maybe. You know, I think Trotsky is regarded as quite a military strategist, if I recall. However, there's some other things that are holding the White Army back. They have some, maybe like two issues that cause them trouble. Say again? Let's see. Let me go back here. Oh yeah, okay, the Red Army, yep. So yeah, it says the Red Army, or the White Army was a collection of monarchists, constitutional democrats, and social revolutionaries. Okay, yeah, in the next sentence, it says here, the White Army could not agree on a program for Russia, nor on a supreme commander, right? So this White Army, it's almost like, you remember when we talked about the Spanish Civil War, and there were these two sides, and it was like a collection of various people, and they don't really agree on anything, right? Some of the White Army here, some of them want the Tsar back, some of them want a democracy, some of them just want revolution, some of them are foreign powers who really don't care what happens in Russia as long as it's not communist. And so these guys in the White Army aren't really united in any way. The only thing that unites them is that they don't like the Bolsheviks. And so they have trouble agreeing on anything, right? Who should be the commander, what the strategy should be, should they attack now or later or whatever. They have no leadership, right? And so they're not quite as effective as Trotsky, right? Because Trotsky's in charge and he's got everybody kind of organized and fighting in the same direction. But what do the peasants think of the White Army, the poor farmers? What do they think the White Army is? What do they say here? The common perception is that it stood for the czarist autocracy and landed gentry. So the people, the regular farmers, thought that the White Army was trying to get the Tsar back in, right? Or, was trying, the White Army was trying to take Russia back to the way it was, right? With a Tsar and a bunch of nobles, and then the poor farmers own nothing, right? So the peasants weren't going to help out the White Army because they thought the White Army just wanted to go back to the way it was before, which was crappy for everybody, right? So they have no support, they have no leadership, and they fold, right? And so the Bolsheviks are going to be triumphant here. The next thing Lenin does is tries a new economic policy, NEP. And what is this new economic policy about? What's it about? There it is. Top of page 76. What's this new economic policy? Yep. What is it? Well, I guess in general that's what an economic policy is, I would say. What does it say here? It says the new economic policy through a return to individual economic initiative and the profit motive. Okay. He presented it. To small industry, and it looks like small industries are allowed to keep. They pay tax, but then they can keep the excess. They can keep their profits, right? So again, that's not socialism. That's capitalism, right? You have a little factory, you build things, you pay your tax to the government, and then the extra money that you make, that's yours to keep, right? Is that socialism? No, that's capitalism, right? So here, Lenin is trying to get the economy going, right? So he's trying to create communism from the top down. He's trying to impose socialism. And it's not working. The people aren't going along with it, right? Because again, that's not really what they wanted. And so what does he do? He's like, okay, well, I'm going to allow a little bit of capitalism to see if I can get these people working again, right? And hopefully if they, see the ability to make some extra money, hopefully they'll work harder, because we need people to work a little harder here. We need to get the economy moving, right? So he allows a little bit of capitalism just to kind of get things moving. Does it work? Does it work? Well, not if you ask a communist. Yes, but let's see. Oh, yeah, look here. By 1928, the economy had recovered to its pre-war strength. Okay, so that's good, right? The economy was kind of going down. Lenin allows this little bit of capitalism, and things kind of recover, right? They're still not great, right? Because before the war, Russia wasn't in that good shape anyway, but it makes it better, right? So it helps, right? His new economic policy does do something, right? It does help. It does work. Do you really want to do the break? Okay. Let's do a break then. We'll come back in 10 and we'll talk about the other couple questions here, okay? Okay, and we are back. So, we're kind of partway in the middle of the questions here. The new economic policy, right. So, Lenin tries to socialize agriculture in the Soviet Union, or, well, what's kind of becoming the Soviet Union. It doesn't go very well, again, because this is not really what people wanted, right? Again, I think what they wanted was capitalism and democracy. I think that's where they were headed. And then, you know, the Bolsheviks and Lenin kind of grabbed control of the car and steered the country another way, right? So now they're into socialism and communism. And so Lenin's attempts to sort of impose socialism from the top, not going very well, right? People aren't giving their harvest to the state. They're kind of hiding it away and selling it on the black market and keeping the money. So Lenin decides, okay, we're going to let a little bit of capitalism here in smaller enterprises so that the economy can get moving again, right? And once the economy is working well, then we can kind of finish our transition to socialism, right? That's kind of his plan. But unfortunately for him, he's going to die, right? So the revolution is in late 1917, but in 1922, he's going to have a stroke, right? Actually, I think he's going to have a few of them. But basically what that means is Lenin is kind of less able to lead the party, and then he's going to die in, I think, 1924, 23 or 24, he's going to die. And so there's kind of three positions, right, to succeed him. And so who are the kind of people that are trying to step up and lead the Communist Party? There's kind of three of them. Who's the first guy? Who? Stalin? Yeah, and so what's Stalin's kind of approach to the Soviet Union? What's he suggesting they should do? Say that again? Yeah. Yeah, he's in favor of a full transition to communism, right? What's his thoughts on kind of like worldwide socialist revolution? Right? Yeah, so he's gonna use, so Stalin's gonna start and use these 5-year plans to move Soviet Union forward. But the idea of like a worldwide socialist revolution is important at this point, because the three kind of contenders for the leadership position here, they have different ideas on it, right? So the idea here is that, yes, the Soviet Union will be a socialist country, but does the rest of the world need to have a socialist revolution as well in order for the Soviet Union to survive, right? And so Trotsky, who is out on the left side, right? Trotsky on the left side, he thinks yes, right? Trotsky thinks, yes, we have to have worldwide socialist revolution. And what does Trotsky think of the new economic policy? Lenin's new economic policy. What does Trotsky think of it? Let's see. Let's see. Right, page 76, kind of the right side of page 76. What does it say about Trotsky? 76. What does Trotsky think of the new economic policy? was doomed, right, if what didn't happen?
Sorry, I didn't do it.
So socialism in the USSR is doomed unless what? What else needs to happen? What's it say here? Without the spread of socialism abroad, Trotsky felt that socialism in the USSR was doomed. Right. So Trotsky feels that the rest of the world is going to need to have a socialist revolution so that the Soviet Union can survive. Right. And what does he say about new economic policy? He says he viewed the new economic policy as a betrayal of communist ideology. Right? Which it is, right? Because the new economic policy is capitalism, right? It's the opposite of socialism. So Lenin has added in a little bit of capitalism to get things moving, but Trotsky's like, no, that's a betrayal of what we're trying to do. That's going in the wrong direction, right? So Trotsky is kind of full-on communism, and we need a full worldwide revolution, right? That's kind of what Trotsky's saying. Who's on the other side, on the far right? There's another guy on the far right. Trotsky's on the left. Who's on the right? Who? Who? Nope, Lenin's dead. Rest in peace, Lenin. Lenin's dead. Trotsky's out on the kind of left wing position. Somebody's out on the right. Who is it? Yeah, Nikolai Bukharin, right? So he's out on the right. What's his position? What does he think should happen? Or what are his views? What does he think about the new economic policy, for instance? This Nikolai Bukharin. Okay, so Yo-Yo, would you say that he's in favor? That he likes new economic policy? Yeah, right? So Trotsky out on the left is saying, no, the new economic policy, that's a betrayal of communism, right? Bukharin, who's out on the right, is like, you know what? It's okay, right? It's a temporary thing. Yes, we want full communism, but this is kind of working for us. So new economic policy is good, right? And we don't really need to worry about a worldwide revolution either. It'll happen, right? No worries. And then who's in the center? As Jim mentioned, it's Stalin, right? And what does Stalin think? And I think that's at the top of page 77. He wanted to do what?
He is
Oh, okay.
he is forcing them to control in order to do his goal.
And his goal is socialism in one country, right? So yeah, so this kind of sums up what Stalin thinks, right? Stalin thinks that, you know, yes, we can do pure socialism here. So he's in favor of getting rid of the new economic policy. But he's like, you know what? We don't need a worldwide revolution either. We can build it right here. And then, you know, other people will be inspired by our example, right? So he's kind of in the middle, right? And as we see through, you know, the fact that most people aren't really extreme, most people are in the center of things, and Stalin is a pretty intelligent political operator, he manages to kind of push both of his opponents out, right? He gets Bukharin and his buddies kicked out of the Politburo. He sends Trotsky into exile and later has him murdered. And so Stalin kind of pushes the others out and becomes the leader, right? Yeah, okay. So that brings us to, hang on a sec here. That brings us to, I think I just got to jump ahead a little bit to here. No, to here. Oh, yeah. So this brings us to, hang on. Yeah, this guy. But wait. Yeah. So the winner of this contest is Joseph Stalin, right? He's going to succeed Vladimir Lenin as leader of the Soviet Union, right? And again, this is the guy who's really going to shape the Soviet Union, right? So Lenin hasn't really had a chance, right? He overthrew the Provisional Government, right? He said, "Yay, we're communists now." But first I've got to fight this civil war for 3 years with the White Army while trying to put communism into place, even though the peasants are pushing back. And then he has a stroke, right? So Lenin kind of, it's like the biblical story, you know, Moses who like leads the Israelites out of Egypt, but he's not allowed to enter the promised land. This is kind of Lenin, right? Lenin kind of achieves the revolution, but he's not really able to do anything, right? Because he doesn't really have a lot of time and then he dies. And so Stalin here is really going to shape what the Soviet Union becomes. And if you look, he's in power from about 1924 to 1953. So he's in power for 30 years. So what the Soviet Union becomes has a lot to do with this guy. Okay? He's a major force in what this country becomes. This is him as a young man. Man, look at that hair. Are you jealous of that hair? I sure am. He's a monster. Let's be clear. He's a monster. But man, that hair is just. And that's like, hang on, when was this guy born? 1870. That's probably like in 1890 something. So this is like, he doesn't even have any shampoo or conditioner or product. That's just his natural hair. Give me a break, right? Unbelievable. Anyway, this is Joseph Stalin. He's going to be important because he's going to shape the Soviet Union for the next 30 years of its history. But what do you know about him besides the fact that he has awesome hair? Well, I just told you that. But what else? Right. So yeah, he used a series of 5-year plans, and he transformed the Soviet Union from, poor agricultural disaster into industrial superpower. Right. That cannot be easy to do. Right. That cannot be easy to do. That's very impressive. Yeah, he was Yeah, he was brutal, right? And lots of people die under his rule, particularly anyone who opposes him, right? And so, are you thinking maybe a little bit later in his career, or just all the way through? No, definitely all the way through. But toward the end of Stalin's career as a politician, he starts to get very paranoid, and he kind of purges the Politburo of anyone who he thinks is against him. And so, yeah, well, here, let me show you something here. Let me just see what slide number it is. This kind of sums up Jim's observation about him here. This is a quote from Stalin. This is a primary source, if you will. Death solves all problems. No man, no problem. Right? So you can pretty clearly see his outlook on things, right? If anyone gets in his way, he's very comfortable with taking them out. It may interest you to know, we're jumping ahead here a bit. It may interest you to know that he actually made the cover of Time magazine. So here you can see in 1940, he's Man of the Year, or Person of the Year, I should say. Time magazine's Person of the Year in 1940, and again in 1943. Unbelievable, especially given what we'll learn about him very shortly. But back here. Back to this. What else do we know about him?
He signed a treaty with Hitler.
Right. He signed the non-aggression pact prior to World War II, right? They said they weren't going to attack each other, and they got to split Poland, between them, right? Too bad Hitler didn't.
Also, I think he is very selfless.
Selfish?
No, like selfless.
Selfless.
Yeah.
Okay, well, why do you say that?
Because like I saw that in the history, the Nazi Germany was getting his son has been captured by Nazi Germany, and like the Nazi prompted to exchange some German who's captured by Soviet Union, and he refused.
So okay, so did you just say his son was captured?
His son.
Okay.
His son.
Yeah.
And also when he dies, although he is leader of the Soviet Union, when he dies, he didn't have like a lot of treasures or money or something.
That is very true, and we'll read about that shortly. That he is leader of the Soviet Union for 30 years, but he's not really that interested in money or riches, right? And so, certainly other people who wind up in a position of sole power, they use it to enrich themselves, right? And they have fancy cars and mansions and all kinds of things. Stalin's not into any of that stuff, right? Stalin is in it for the power, right? He doesn't really care about the money or the luxuries or things that he can do or buy as sole leader. He's just in it for the power, right? He cares nothing about the money.
Does he care about his country?
Did he?
Yeah.
What makes you want to ask that question?
Because you're saying he doesn't care about, he only cares about power, but he's a dictator, but a dictator can be careless or doesn't even care about their country.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think he's,
That's an interesting question, right? Because you would hope that he would, right? But then, so many people die in the process, under Stalin, and 30 years under Stalin. I don't think it's out of question to say that there's at least 20 million people will die, maybe more. Okay? And so that's a good question. Does he care about his country? You would think so, but then doesn't that seem odd that he would create conditions where 20 million people die? That doesn't seem very caring at all. Or maybe he thinks of the country differently, right? Maybe he thinks of the state as greater than the individuals. And if the individuals die, well, it's just in the service of creating the Soviet Union, right? Maybe he's got a more abstract idea of what the state is, right? I think of Canada as 36 million people, right? That's how I imagine it, right? We have 36 million people. We're all living in the same place. That's what Canada is. But Joseph Stalin might not think of the Soviet Union that way. He might not think of it as a collection of people. He might think of it as something maybe more abstract, right? That's a good question. What else do we know about him? Anything? Would you say that he's not very he's not mentioned a lot in popular culture, is he? Like Hitler is, right? Like people are comparing, people compare everything to either the Nazis or Hitler, right? Everything is somehow comparable to Hitler and the Nazis, right? It's not. And again, I would suggest that you almost never compare anything to either of them because, well, that's a good question, right? You would think it would be the Nazis, right? Because whenever we want to sort of highlight that something is bad, yeah, we compare it. This is worse than the Nazis, right? Or we shouldn't do this. This is what Adolf Hitler did, right? So we very quickly gravitate towards talking about Hitler, but we don't really talk about this guy very much. But again, as I mentioned, millions of people will die under his regime, right? They will starve, they will be executed, they'll be sent to work camps in Siberia, they'll just vanish without a trace, right? So I don't know, it's interesting. What I'd like to do, we don't really have enough time left to do it today. It's kind of a funny laugh. Or a beatbox. What I'd like to do on Monday is read a quick page and a half on him, just a little biography of what he's like. Because again, this guy is going to shape the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is going to be a huge part of the 20th century, right? The Cold War basically defines the second half of the 20th century, and this guy has a big role to play in it, right? Remember when I said in V for Vendetta that the government in that movie has a lot to do with the Soviet Union? Well, he's the one who creates that Soviet Union, right? A lot of the surveillance of citizens and secret police and detention camps and all of that stuff comes from Stalin, right? So the architect of this country and the architect of governments like we see in V for Vendetta is this guy, right? So again, it makes sense to pay attention to him because he's kind of a big deal, right? Historically, anyway. So that's what I'd like to do Monday. No, we'll look at it on Monday. But I do one thing I want to mention is I want to have our fourth quiz on Friday. Next week's going to be a little weird because we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we have a holiday on Thursday because Thursday is it's on your hat.
Canada Day.
It's Canada Day, yeah. Yes, Canada became a country on July 1st, 1867. So we are having our, 154th birthday? Is that correct? 154th birthday, that's a lot of candles. So again, we're gonna have the day off. So Thursday will be the day off and then we just have Friday. So I think we'll kind of stick the quiz into Friday and then we'll just have kind of a 3-day school week next week, and we'll do that. I'm going to check for the quizzes, but last time I think I went. Actually, let's see what I did. Let's see what I did. Last time, the quiz was on. Hold on. 9 to 16. Classes 9 to 16. So this time we'll probably go from like class 17 to 27 or so. But let me just look at the material and see where a good place to draw the line is. But again, we'll do it the same as last time. We'll do it next Friday, so you have a week to prepare. I just wanted to let you know so I don't forget. Before we break, is there anything else we need to discuss or be concerned about, or are we good? We are good? Okay. That's it for today. Pack it up. Have a good weekend. Stay cool. It's going to be ludicrously warm.
Very hot.
It's going to be very hot. We'll see you Monday, okay?
Enjoy it.
Thank you.